So this video isn't necessarily about making comics, but it is about making stuff for the Kickstarter that come from the comics. Now, you're going to be familiar with this character from Encoding Bushido. His name's Anjin. If you haven't been reading the series or following some of the blog posts and things, he's basically the lead character of Encoding Bushido, at least this first run of Encoding Bushido. This character actually started in Zbrush. Well, he started in the graphic novel, but that's another story. This is an early version of the sculpt in ZBrush of the character. Now, I have different poses for this character as well in ZBrush using its own native tools, just to sort of test what I'm going to do for the top tier reward of the Kickstarter campaign, which was set at $500, and I was going to print this on my Ultimaker 2 at a reasonable resolution so I can get it done in time. But these were some of the test poses from this file. And there were a few of these that where he was going to be holding a sword or he's not going to be holding a sword. And that reason was generally because a sword printed at, even if this guy was like 2 feet tall, printing a sword would be a little above the Ultimaker 2's pay grade. Now, I could actually send this out, but that would exceed it would exceed the expenses for even a $500 Kickstarter reward. You can see here that there are 72 different subtools, and managing them is pretty difficult. But even ZBrush has its own methodologies for in its plugins. It has its own methodologies under the Transpose Master. This particular plugin has the ability to work with every subtool you've got in your Z project file, and that essentially just creates one of these, which is a singular. You can see here it's reduced to one subtool. It creates a single subtool that you can work from with all your sculpting tools. Some people even use this plugin has the option to use a T-pose rig, which is basically you can do it yourself, but you can use the pre-made ones as well. You can use the built-in tools for rigging. Now, I don't really like those, generally because they involve the Z-spheres. I'm not particularly fond of Z-spheres. One of the things they do is you can get a Z-sphere rig roughly. They're like standard animation rigs in that they kind of do a general weighting around those. Excuse me, I didn't hit the T button. Get that guy back up there. The Z-sphere rigs, generally speaking, in ZBrush, they're pretty slow. So I prefer to go out to a 3D program. For this instance, it's Blender, and you guys know how much I like free software. Well, Blender's got a Rigify plugin of its own, which is represented by this object. It creates a set of bones that you can manipulate in the interface at a really raw level. It's just the points on the bones, which generates this rig. Now, going into pose mode, this is just going to be just as slow as manipulating. You can see that the interactivity there is really low. This is just as slow as doing it in ZBrush, but this has the added flexibility of, this rig is a fully posable animation rig. Now you see I haven't done a full weighting pass on this. It deformed over some of these areas as well. But, when you're in ZBrush, you can use, when you're in Blender or your preferred animation program and you export it, Maya, 3D Studio Max, almost every major program, and even Blender, which now is becoming a major program, they have auto rigging tools, which for humans, they're very credible. So for this guy, I exported a very low resolution version, and you can see one of his fingers is out of place here. But this really is just for a very quick version of this rig to kind of move around. This was also used in the new trailer for Encoding Bushido. You can see some of the other weight errors. For this low resolution, it doesn't matter what I'm doing for the weighting, so I just let it do its general weighting calculation and then forget it after that. That's because this is never going to be rendered or seen by anybody but me, during the process of posing the figure. But these are particularly easy to fix. It's just that they're not represented, in the high res version, so it's nothing to worry about. It doesn't render. It's one way to save time. But going forward, this was used to make the trailer. Now that is part of what I was doing in the second part of the campaign, where I wanted to actually feature a few shots of Anjin in an environment that was also part of the graphic novel. So Blender, like a lot of programs, has added a real-time version of its own render engine. Let me give it a second here. This real-time engine has the ability to form, you can see them here, glows, glares, depth of field effects, highlights, and other things that normally you would associate with a compositing program. But real-time engines like Unreal and Unity both have this functionality built in. There's an enormous amount of lighting, rendering, lens effects, ambient occlusion. You can see them here, screen space reflections. You can turn those off and flattens out everything. There's a new motion blur for Blender's 2.9 feature, which I'm going to install in a little bit. But this shot was featured in the second trailer for Encoding Bushido, mostly as a proof of concept, because like a lot of comic creators, for me the ultimate version of this entire project isn't a major series or getting picked up by Dark Horse or somebody or Image. The ultimate version of this for me has always been a film, and that's definitely because of my background, working in visual effects. I like working on, let's call them transmedia projects, where there's a publishing arm, which would be, the print version of Encoding Bushido, and a multimedia arm, which could extend as far as maybe video games and films. And I've already discussed this with my friend, with my friend Jeremy on his channel, that I'm nowhere near there. It's pie in the sky dream, dream level. I think I phrased it for him as dreamscape level fantasizing about where your project can go. But this was definitely, if you can recognize when you read the graphic novel, you recognize this environment as one that I've blogged about before as being built in SketchUp as repeating environment throughout the series. And this is, I applied some basic textures and lighting and fed what was going to be the 3D printed figure into the environment. So this has already become a very transmedia project. It's become, video content. It's become, of course, the graphic novel, printed content, online content, because it was for a while on Comixology only. And, I only took it to a few conventions over the years, at least that preview issue. But it's already extended into quite, a transmedia project, generating content for YouTube, for, all the online social media platforms, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sure you saw this second trailer. I'm just going to let it play. So this was definitely, in motion, really exciting, at least for me, for working on this project for years, essentially starting almost 10 years ago on the preview issue and seeing one of my characters in motion. Ultimately, some of this stuff is not even previs for some people. But there is, I have everything to actually start a film. I have the raw material for the entire story, as it exists now. I've started working on a follow-up. Discussing that with Jeremy on his own YouTube channel was an interesting thing, because I've talked about his project as well. It's essentially a multimedia project at this point, but I definitely wanted to show you guys all of this stuff because it's not necessarily related to comics, but it is a really interesting sort of behind the scenes. This is how I'm approaching the entirety of the project, all the way to the end. With everything that I know how to do artistically, this has engaged everything I know how to do, from writing to drawing, painting, sketching, sculpting, animating, rigging, texturing, lighting, compositing. That's a lot of ings. But over the years, when you accumulate skills, you want to be able to use them in a meaningful way on a project that is meaningful to you. So this is likely one of the final, if not the final vlog, definitely one of the more advanced blogs, because I can't really get into the details without going into an entirely new series of vlogs. So if you guys are interested in that kind of stuff, let me know in the comments. Shoot me an email if you remember the newsletter. You can reply to those newsletter emails. What is it you want to see going forward? Let me know. All right. Thanks, guys.